in Sarasota, Florida today. Um, so the question is, what is jazz?
Well, it's the ability to do whatever you want, to kind of create the atmosphere that you want. And that's one of the differences between jazz and contemplative music is you can plan everything out with classical, and you can kind of plan everything out, plan your plan of attack. But with jazz, it's just whatever comes to mind at the time, and it kind of helps you figure out what you're thinking.
A lot of the big band culture in our country began with people like Duke Ellington, Count Basie, the Glenn Miller Band, the Dorsey Brothers. They created a culture in which people could actually dance. They created a culture in which people could actually dance to music. It came out of really it started in the 1880s. Came out of a lot of the stuff that was happening in New Orleans at the time. Stride piano, a lot of that Scott Joplin, ragtime. Then came Art Tatum, Fats Waller, all these stride pianists, and then came a great learner from that time period, Duke Ellington, a stride pianist, and he really assimilated all that together.
So one of the things that I really like about jazz as compared to classical is classical you don't have that many extended harmonies. You'll run into a seventh chord every now and then, but you're not going to find many ninths or added tones or altered tones. But with jazz, pretty much everything is going to be a seventh chord, and you're always free to add any other extensions that you want to it.
I didn't understand what improvisation was really, and then jazz. I saw that that's what all jazz was about. Really sophisticated jamming.
Well, improvisation's a big thing. You spend your entire life learning it, and that's what makes the music so interesting, because you're never really playing the same thing twice, and you can always learn something. You're 80, 90 years old, you've been doing it since you were 60, you're still dying to get out there and try this new lick or thing that you've got in your head. So improvisation is really knowing what the chords are and the notes in the chord, or for guitar players we have an easy shortcut, which is we know the shape of the chord and we know those notes and we play around with those notes.
Back in the day, there was this whole big culture about jazz, and it was like this brotherhood. Everyone knew everyone, and so I've heard, the golden days. I think to an extent it's moved away from that. I mean, there's still the camaraderie. You still know everyone in the industry if you're up there.
Well, there's this saying by Frank Zappa that jazz isn't dead, it just smells funny. And what he's saying there is, really, jazz has always never been mainstream. It happened to be, like, in the 30s and 40s, music that people were dancing to, but really, that was its heyday, really, back in those times, the 30s and the 40s. It was always, in the 50s, there was a lot of people who were hip, like, the beatniks and the beat generation were hip to a lot of that swinging shit. Jazz, people like Jack Kerouac listened to it, but it was really always kind of a counterculture. And ever since probably people listened to it all throughout the 60s and the 70s, but in a modern day sense, I don't think the young generation that's in our country right now really understands what jazz is. I mean, the mass audience.
I think a lot of people kind of think that jazz is just pounding, or just blowing as hard as you can into your trumpet or whatever. But if there's not a feeling there, and if you don't have some sort of contrasts with your dynamics, it just gets boring, and it doesn't matter what scales you're using or what harmonies you're playing. It's just going to sound boring. But with jazz, every time there's a solo, at the end of the solo people are clapping. If you do something that's just really cool in your solo, everyone's just kind of shouting, yeah, that was good. And if you're not doing so hot, you kind of know it too, because people will let you know.
Jazz really is defined more in the sense of instead of defining it in the sense of it being a genre of music, like jazz, hip hop, pop, rock and roll. Like instead of like throwing jazz in there as a genre, um, like the same way someone throws classical into a genre, classical and jazz can't really be classified as genres of music because any music could be jazz. You know, a classical piece could be jazz, a hip hop piece could be jazz. The word jazz is it means to improvise, to jazz. It's a way of thinking rather than a kind of music. It's the way you approach. It's the way you approach the music.
Jazz scene, for a couple of reasons, I guess, is very good in Gainesville. There have always been a couple of good people at the university. Um, we have a lot of restaurants that like to have live music, and in the past 10 years or so, that's been a good scene for musicians. Tonight, and a classic makeup is two guitars, one playing rhythm, one playing lead, an upright bass, and a violin player. What we're playing tonight is called, in America, called Gypsy Jazz. In Europe, it's called MUH, M-O-N-O-U-C-H-E. And what it is a type of music that was started by Django Reinhardt and Stefan Grappelli. And it's like American swing, but they didn't have drummer. And Django, because of the way he played or had to play because of the loss of a couple of his fingers, invented a very unique style. This music is all about rhythm. Whereas, you know, you have a lot of types of jazz where rhythm isn't that important, free jazz. But here, rhythm is everything, whether you're playing what they call the pomp, or you're playing the boleros and tangos, and also a lot of bossa nova in this style.
What is jazz to me? Jazz is just expression. Jazz is just fun. Jazz is just, I think, one of the highest forms of expression and like information transfer. You know, you lose so much out through words. The music really says a lot more than words can ever say, you know.
It's fun. You don't have to. You know, there's practicing, but it's not like playing the same thing 5 million times until you can finally kind of play it. You know, it's learning the concepts. It's learning your scales, learning your chords, learning the melody, learning what the bass note is for the tune. And then it's just, you know, you play it and you try not to think so much about that.
This is a Hammond B3 organ made famous by Jimmy Smith in the 1950s.